Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopijana Vallabha Girivardhari Jashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jayam Vishnupad Paramahansa Parivrajagacharya Ashtotara Shatashishimad His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki ISKCON Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Grantara Shriman Bhagavatam Ki Nitai Gaura Premanandi. Oh, glory to the assembled devotees. Oh, glory to the assembled devotees. Oh, glory to the assembled devotees. Oh, glory to Shishi Guru and Shiguranga. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 10, the Summon Bonon, Chapter 60, Krishna teases Queen Rukmini, text 25 and 26. Tadristva Bhagavan Krishna Priyaya Prema Bandhanam Hasya Praudhin Ajanantya Karuna Sombakampata Tadristva Bhagavan Krishna Priyaya Prema Bandhanam Hasya Praudin Ajanantya Karuna Sombakampata Tadristva Bhagavan Krishna Priyaya Prema Bandhanam Hasya Praudhin Ajanantya Karuna Sombakampata. Please chant. Tadristva Bhagavan Krishna Priyaya Prema Bandhanam Hasya Praudhin Ajanantya Karuna Sombakampata. Tadristva Bhagavan Krishna Priyaya prema bandhanam hasya praudin ajanantya karuna sumbakampata tadristva bhagavam Krishna priyaya prema bandhanam hasya praudin ajanantya karuna sumbakampata tat this dristva seeing Bhagavam the Supreme Lord Krishna Krishna Priyajayaha of his beloved Prema by pure love of God Bandhanam the bondage Hasya of his joking Praudhin the full import Ajanantyaha who could not comprehend Karunaha merciful Saha he Ambakampata felt compassion. Translation by the disciples of His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Seeing that his beloved was so bound to him in love that she could not understand the full meaning of his teaching, merciful Lord Krishna felt compassion for her. Text number 26. Paryankat aburu hyasu tan ut tan ut tan uttapya chaturbuja keshan samuhya tat paktram pramrija padmapanina. Translation: the Lord quickly got down from the bed, manifesting four arms. He picked her up, gathered her hair, and caressed her face with his lotus hand. Purport: the Lord manifested four hands so he could do all these things simultaneously. Om Agyana Timirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Umilitangena Tasmai Sri Gurube Namaha Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Shrimate Ramapada Swamin Iti Namine Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhaktivedanta Swamin Iti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirveshesha Shunyavadi Pashatyadi Satarine Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhya cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. So this is a very touching manifestation of Krishna's affection that gives a complete, beautiful picture of the personality of Godhead. And this picture of the personality of Godhead is exclusively revealed in the Vedic scriptures, and specifically from the Vedic scriptures in these Bhakti Shastras. And this type of feature is very, very intimately revealed in literatures such as the Srimad Bhagavatam and the Srimad Bhagavad Gita. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur comments that Krishna showed four hands in order to rise her from the ground, embrace her, and wipe her face. he bound up her hair. And Srila Jiva Goswami say his compassion is shown in 3 verses. He raised her from the ground and placed her on his lap. He wiped her face continually. So it's something that shows, Krishna's affection and caring and, how he manifests or how he expresses the love and the concern that he have for Srimati Rukmini Devi. And the picture that we see, especially in the conceptions that are there of the personality of Godhead, that in different religions and cultures are there, that, there is an understanding of the personality of Godhead that is picture that people, the conception that people have of the personality of Godhead. And that's when we talk about major religions that have a conception of God, a conception of God that have particular personal features, or in one sense, a personal feature, a personal conception of the Lord. Major religions have this type of, at least, conception, but the picture that they have of God is that sometimes it's described as an angry person, very, very strict, sometimes even jealous. Like in the Old Testament, in the Bible, we find that there's a lot of rules, but there's very little mercy. Because, in one sense, the way God, according to these presentations, he deals with non-believers is very heartless. The conception that these people have. Of course, this is the interpretation that some of these religions take from these revealed scriptures. So that all these rules, very little mercy, and even goes as far as certain religions that that those who do not wish to surrender to the particular faith must be killed. So there is this conceptions of God that is, is a very stern, heartless. You must follow rules. If not, you're basically condemned for eternity to hell if you don't follow his rules. So it's a very hard conception of the personality of God, and therefore one should basically surrender to him out of fear. There's a lot of fear mongering in order to be, to do the right thing, to be in the right path, in the righteous path. And which, when you put it together with also parts of the conceptions that are in these scriptures, is that God is seen as a father. It's a father figure. So we pray to, you say in the Judeo-Christian tradition, we pray to uh, to the Father, God as a father, and to put together these two things, like is God is the father of all humanity. The natural relationship of father and a child is that the father is always looking after the welfare of his progeny. And this conception to send some of the children that are off track and condemn them forever into eternal hell, and not giving them the the means to actually reform or to come back to the position, the right track, is it doesn't make sense. So nevertheless, there's all these different conceptions that we have of the personality of Godhead, in which, you know, uh, we have to be, in one sense, fearful, in one sense, fearful, and you have to follow. It's like law and order. If you go to, every time you're summoned to go into a court, into a courthouse to respond, you're a little nervous because you can be punished. So therefore, you make sure that you don't break the law, because if you break the law, you're gonna be punished. So it sort of works, to keep order thing and to keep people on the right track. So that's an aspect of a relationship with God. Out of fear, you you follow. But these cultural interpretations in which God is heartless, or is there's no mercy or compassion, only to those, to is not equal to everybody, is something that is exclusive to a very exclusive group, and the rest have no means to actually take shelter of the personality of Godhead, or have no means to come to that shelter. But the picture that is here, that we actually being exposed to, is that this immense, unlimitedly loving personality, supremely loving personality, the picture that we have of Krishna, that is given here. And we're giving entrance to this very, very sweet, tender, loving exchanges and relationship that Krishna has with his devotees. That when he see Shrimati Rukmini Devi going through all that anxiety, that she fainted, immediately Krishna felt something. It's the immediate thing. The first thing is that, boom, he manifests four arms, because he needs to, do is the needs required to pick her up, and at the same time to comfort her, and he can do that with more arms, like that. So it's just an expression of his love. When you want to do something for someone that you care for, immediately it's almost like, you have, there's the desire to raise to the occasion, brings all kinds of capacities, that you're able to 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 manifest. So Krishna has this extreme loving nature, and Krishna himself, he does that. He tells Arjuna in the Bhagavad Gita that is something that is naturally there. It's common sense when there is relationships. And Krishna expressed that he have this relationship with every single living entity in this world. But he explains that according to how the different living entities approach him, he reciprocates accordingly. Ye yatamam prapadyante tanstataiva bhajamyaham. And according to how they come to him, then he reciprocates. And in the ninth chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna explained this somewhat puzzling thing in one sense, and this is how this whole exclusive is a principle. This principle of reciprocation is when you don't have the body of understanding that we receive by our Vaishnava acharyas, then it can be very easily misinterpreted. Because then you may think that God is biased towards those who are his followers. And for those who are not with him, then they can go to hell. And there's no in betweens, like that. So it's an exclusive sort of reciprocation. But that's not what Krishna presents. That's not what Krishna presents. And then, on Krishna's own world, in the ninth chapter, he tells us that he have no favorites. He doesn't envy anyone or favors anyone. He's equal to everyone. But at the same time, for those who love, who serve me with affection, then Krishna does all this, he manifests all these very, very beautiful, intimate connections that appears that he favors. But there's this is the part that with the guidance of our Vaishnava Acharyas, we're able to understand deeply. So Krishna tells us, that I envy no one, nor I am partial to anyone. I am equal to all, but whoever renders service unto me in devotion is a friend, is in me, and I'm also a friend to him. So it appears that it's a contradiction, but it's not. It's not a contradiction. And our Vaishnava Acharyas explains that, Krishna is like the sun, and he showers the rays, of this invigorating rays, is warmth to everyone, is equal for everyone. But if we decide to be in a cave and not come out, then it's not Krishna's, it's our decision. So, but the mercy is always available. It's always available to all living entities. And the other thing that Krishna explains is that everybody is following his path. So at the end, even for those who want to forget Krishna and remain away from Krishna, Krishna reciprocates by facilitating that. But as the ever well-wisher of the living entity and like a responsible father, he is right there alone with the living entity within the heart, and as a super soul, accompany the living entity to all the things that they have to go. So, it's like having an hyperactive kid. You've seen them sometimes. A responsible parent is always on site. And the kid may be, doing climbing a tree or thinking like that, they can, that type of thing. But a responsible parent, you allow the kid because he needs to have that energy that needs to be, occupied. A responsible parent is very watchful, allowing the kid to actually move around and do all the activities and, the hyper activities, but very watchful in case the kid could be in any type of danger. So the Lord is there constantly with the living entity. So this apparent um, sort of favoritism, like here's something that I think this is from Sudama, the garland maker in not Sudama Brahman, but the Sudama, the flower from the flower shop in Mathura. When Krishna went to his place and took flowers, him and Balaram, uh, Sudama expressed, because you're the well-wishing friend and supreme soul of the whole universe, you regard all with unbiased vision. Therefore, although you reciprocate your devotees' loving worship, you always remain equally disposed towards all living beings. So, Krishna's love is there and is equally disposed. It's like we become blind to it. It's something that is there and it is constantly there, but it's just we don't perceive it out of material condition. And it's something that that is explained. This is a question that Maharaj Parikshit asked to Srila Sukadev Goswami when he was puzzled about this whole Shishupal event. We know that how the whole seven canto evolved, from Maharaj Parikshit questioning Srila Sukadev Goswami. And Srila Sukadev Goswami tells, he was asking about the situation with how is that the Lord appears to favor, the devotees, and being the enemy of Indra, have being favoring Indra and not the demons. What is the benefit for the Lord to get involved into those conflicts? And why does he take this side and not the side? What is the benefit? So Sukadev Goswami answers by quoting this conversation between Maharaj Yudhisthira and Krishna. And Maharaj Yudhisthira asked during the killing of Shishupal, and about this same thing, about supposedly Krishna's being biased in one sense. So he says, because of the bodily conception of life, the conditioned soul thinks that when the body is annihilated, the living being is annihilated. Lord Vishnu, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is the supreme control, the super soul of all living entities. Because he has no material body, he has no full conception of I and mine. It is therefore incorrect to think that he feels pleasure or pain when blaspheme or offer prayers. This is impossible for him. Does he have no enemy and no friends? When he chastises the demons, it is for their good. And when he accepts the prayers of the devotee, it is for their good. He is affected neither by the prayers nor by blasphemy. Therefore, by enmity or by devotional service, by fear, by affection, or by lusty desires, by all these or any one of them, by all of these or any one of them, if a conditioned soul somehow or other concentrate his mind upon the Lord, the result is the same for the Lord because of his blissful position. Is never affected by enmity or friendship. Therefore, a demon like Shishupal who is blaspheming him becomes liberated. A demon like Agasura becomes liberated. In the same way that a great devotee also becomes liberated by worshiping the Lord with devotion. So at the end, by concept, look what is explained here by Srila Sukadev Goswami is like just by concentrating one mind in Krishna, there is for the good of the living entity. So when Krishna reciprocates, in whatever form Krishna reciprocates, that's a manifestation of his loving nature, and have that natural well result that the living entity becomes purified just by constantly thinking of him, even in enmity. We see the cases of these demons. So, so like in the prayers of Akrura, he say to the Lord, anyone with some knowledge, if you have received, if you have received the gift of this knowledge, or anyone with any knowledge, learned person, how a learned person will approach anyone else but Krishna, who is, the well-wisher of all living entities, not just the devotees. So when we worship Krishna with sincerity, then everything will be provided. Everything that we may desire for fulfilling that, for fulfilling the sincere desire to be at the lotus feet of Krishna, everything will be provided. And but when we analyze, in one sense, Krishna's affection, the manifestation of that loving affection, um, sometimes we may see that, although we read in the life of the devotees that Krishna takes away stuff, that devotees sometimes have to go through all these different tribulations and obstacles that appears that you know Krishna is taking away something from us. When we hear these things that if we worship Krishna, he will fulfill all our desires. As a well-wisher, you may think like that. If you're really a well-wisher of someone, you want to give them whatever desire they have to be happy. But that's not how it works with Krishna. Because what Lord Krishna sees is the ultimate happiness. What he wants to give us is the ultimate happiness. A happiness that is not a temporary happiness, that is simply going to entangle us or put us in a very vulnerable position in the material world. But rather, he just takes away the things that all these different attachments and the, the the things or the desires that bounds us to this world. So he's removing that, removing, removing. It's quite a work, and Krishna is facilitating that. It's like a very expert gardener that is removing all these bad weeds out of, the beautiful plants. So Krishna does that. He helps us by removing, removing, and removing. Lord Indra, when after offending Krishna during the lifting of Govardhan hill, eh, and when he came to offer prayers to the Lord, he gave these beautiful prayers. He came with Mother Surabhi eh, to perform Abhishek of Lord Govinda, and he offered these beautiful prayers. And then Krishna responded to Lord Indra, and he told him why he did, what was the purpose behind his dealings with Indra. Because remember, Krishna stopped all the different sacrifices that was traditionally done, and all of that had many purposes, but among one of the main purposes that Krishna wanted to take away Indra's pride. So Krishna tells this to Lord Indra: a man blinded by intoxication with his power and opulence cannot see me nearby with a rod, cannot see me nearby with a rod of punishment in my hand. If I desire his real welfare, I drag him down from his materially fortunate position, which, one makes feel, well, that's a little intense. But actually, is Krishna's great kindness, because this type of, again, blinded by intoxication, what is that does to us but, bring us down into a demoniac type of position, takes us away. So Krishna is reciprocating with the devotional heart of Lord Indra, because Indra is a responsible devotee. And because of that, Krishna is making that arrangement to actually take him down from that position, and being able to remove the great obstacle of pride. And just earlier in this chapter, when Krishna is telling something about himself, to Rukmini, he was saying that the wealthy, the wealthy hardly ever worship me. So that wealthy people have a very, very hard time, or it's more difficult for wealthy people to worship Krishna with a very sincere heart. So Krishna says that he is actually dear for those who have no material possessions. So the impoverished materially, then it's very easy to approach Krishna. Queen Kunti also say, akinchana gocharam, that those who are devoid of all this material opulence, that are impoverished, for them it's very easy to worship Krishna, but the wealthy is very difficult. So Krishna, if he wants to favor you, then he may take away the things. So then that type of reciprocation in which you know the Lord um, is very invested in bringing the devotee closer, on reciprocating on and strengthening, fanning the devotional sentiments of the devotee, the sincere devotional sentiments, then then he helps us that way. He he tells um, he tells Maharaj, this is from the Nava Yogendras, telling Maharaj Nimi um, that Krishna says this. uh, If I especially favor someone, I gradually deprive him of his wealth, then the relative friends of such poverty-stricken man abandon him. In this way, he suffers one distress after another. When he becomes frustrated in his attempts to make money, instead befriends my devotees, and I bestow my special mercy upon him. A person who has thus become sober fully realizes the absolute as his highest truth, the most subtle and perfect manifestation of the Spirit, the transcendental existence without end. In this way, realizing that the Supreme Truth is the foundation of his own existence, he is free from the cycle of material life. So, the whole talk of, that I was inspired when I read this verse is about um, this kind and loving feature of Krishna that is not exclusive, is very open to everyone, regardless if um, regardless of how we feel about him. If there's something, he will reciprocate, and his reciprocation is the means to bring you closer and closer. And by doing that, he sometimes, according to that devotional desire that is there, that it may be overwhelmed by so many material desires, but that devotional desire, that little devotional desire, he reciprocates by starting to remove gradually, and accordingly to how much you can take, remove these different obstacles, and then take you closer and closer and closer to his lotus feet. And that's the feature of the personality of Godhead that is given in these Bhakti Shastras. That is a full manifestation of the personality of Godhead with this utmost quality, or the supreme quality, or the top quality that he has is, he's a loving, supreme being. So the energy, or the main feature, therefore, um, the yoga that is attached to or is propounded in these Bhakti Shastras is Bhakti Yoga, which is love, devotion, loving devotional service. Yato Bhaktir Adokshaye, loving devotional service to the personality of God. So it's about love. And that's the energy, Prema Bhakti. Any comments or questions?
Hare Krishna Prabhu.
Divu Prabhu.
Thank you so much for discussing. This is a very introspective topic of understanding Krishna's relationship with us. In this beginning, you mentioned Old Testament and this God being enforcer If you do not do these things, you get punished. And it's interesting that how every living entity have their own conception of God. You know, even it's important for me to ask myself, what does Krishna means to me? How do I understand Krishna? And Krishna is God, and he's a loving God, but also an authority figure. And however much we understand and read Krishna conscious literatures, my understanding of Krishna is unconsciously affected a lot by how I have been treated by authority figures. Growing up, parents, school teachers, older sisters, parent, all these authority figures, how I've experienced with them, try to post the same experience on Krishna. But it is would be important for me to understand that Krishna, as you mentioned, that he's a loving, kind God who is with me, and he is independent of the conceptions of regardless of how I feel he is. And there is a lot to be worked on in that area. That was my thinking when you were
Mm.
giving your class.
It's a very insightful thing and to be aware. Indeed, a natural propensity, and that's part of human frailty, of conditional frailties, that we tend to um, project our own experience into other things, especially into relationships, and that is not only true with the relationship with God, but it's also true in the relationship with the spiritual master, in the relationship with devotees, in the relationship, any type of relationship, with your spouse or friends or children. We tend to see it from the lenses of my personal experience. So it's all self-centered. And that's just the natural, is what the false ego does. It's all from the center of you. You are the center, and everything moves around you, including God. That's how we see things. And that's the whole process of sadhana bhakti, is to help us break the clasp, or the clamp, how you say, the grasp that the false ego has on us. So we have that natural conditional propensity to sort of project. And so the process of self-realization encourages, directs us to be always introspective. So we have to keep, seeing if the interactions that we have that may have certain effect, either by disturbing us or elating us, whatever different effects that are there, it's good that we're introspective. Why do I feel like this? Where is the root? What part am I playing? All these type of questions that are sort of understanding how these different forces are making me act in certain way, uh, uh, are making me process things in certain way, and even react in a way that I don't want to react that way. You know, it's quite something. How much sometimes, you don't want to be angry or negative, but sometimes, my bottom gets pushed and I say something that I regret. afterwards to someone, or it's not me. It's not what I like to do. It's not what I'm that I. It's not my intention, but it comes out, and I couldn't control it. So to observe how we are control and to go to, okay, how can I break from this? What exactly is happening? What are the trigger points? Because against that, if we are introspective, okay, there's a pattern to these things usually, that some type of interaction happens and that triggers a reaction from myself. So there's a connection. And then when you start to bring it and to peel it down, then you come to some of the things that you mentioned in your comment, that it have to do with already sort of interactions that you had with during your life, that it have certain impression in your consciousness that left that impression. Many of those impressions happens during childhood, because that's when we're the more moldable. So things that happens to us during that time really is almost like makes a huge impression, and that goes throughout your life. So we really have to work out that, and that's not easy. It's part of the whole Anartha Nivriti program. So the whole process of devotional service that is given to us is to help us. That's what Krishna does. Through the mercy of the spiritual master, Krishna gave us this seed of devotional service, which manifests in the form of shraddha, or faith. And by faith, then we start to associate with devotees, and the importance of establishing this relationship with devotees, because the relationship with the spiritual master is something that in Krishna's system is fundamental. And that relationship is a very intimate relationship that emulates, or is the arrangement that Krishna makes, because we're not ready to have that type of connection with Krishna, in terms of being able to have that synchrony of communication and connection with him, like we read here in this passage with the great devotees. But Krishna manifests that opportunity through the relationship with the spiritual master. So in that relationship, then therefore shaksha daridvina shamasta shastre uktata svavyata eva shadvi. The whole concept of bhakti yoga, of devotional service, is sort of capsulated in that relationship. So when you have a bona fide servant of the Lord and a faithful disciple following the principles given by Krishna in Bhagavad Gita, Tat vidhi pranipatena pariprasnena sevaya, those principles of constantly engage in devotion, in service to the spiritual master, constantly have the capacity to ask questions, take guidance, and constantly being able to uh, manifest submission, And when you go through that whole process, then you come to experience all these different obstacles, because submission, this saranagati, or this surrender, that's how we learn how to surrender to Krishna. Because in one sense, The whole principle is that we surrender into Krishna. So that in itself, that is that the combination of things, of those things, those three things, is what have us go through the process of bhajana kriya and anartha nivritti. That's how the system works. That's why Krishna's system works. That's why it's so fundamental, that we develop those very intimate relationships with Krishna's representative. So, and we also have to have, obviously, by Krishna's grace, we have to educate ourselves to understand, that there's qualifications for the spiritual master that you can see, okay, this is a bona fide representative of Krishna. And then there's the qualifications that I have to cultivate as a disciple. And then I'm trying to educate myself on that to become better and better. But just to do those three things will do. So it's a very important thing and very insightful to be aware. But that's the first step. You become aware, but then we have to start to take these different steps with the help of Guru and Krishna to start to shed off, the influence. It becomes lesser and lesser as we go through that path. And one point we'll be free. You'll be able to have this nishta, this steady sort of faith that is not anishtata, that is, sometimes influence, sometimes not. Like that. So yeah. Thank you for sharing that. Krishna Archana, do you have anything to add?
You brought up the point of the Judeo-Christian tradition and the view of the Supreme Personality of Godhead as perhaps punitive or controlling. But the very nature of taking to a religious process is one of worshipping that same personality. So just by virtue of worshipping, it must start to break down that concept, because worship implies acknowledgement of the greatness or acknowledgement of the well-wishing aspect. There has to be, because if one is worshipping, one is submitting to. So it would seem that it's inbuilt in any religious process that there comes through the worship to be some sort of recognition of the connection between oneself and the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and that connection by worship, by virtue of one's acknowledgement of Him, should lead to some sort of reciprocation. It seems that there has to be that inbuilt component.
For sure. It's there in all major religions because they're via medias, the media by which conditioned souls receive um, knowledge and worship of the personality of Godhead. So it's inbuilt there. Is when we start to change things, when we start to interpret the principles that are given in the scriptures, that we get in trouble. So the fact is that we do have to follow strict rules. They have to be disciplined. The problem is when if we're forced by whatever interpretations of people like people share projecting some, you know, our experience of well, if it's rules and regulations, then I have to follow, otherwise I'm gonna be punished. So it's out of fear. If I do all these things out of fear, then it may work, but it may take much longer time because I'm not connecting to that other part that is a loving part. So, I mean, you mentioned the, the worship may be there, but if I'm worshiping out of fear, it's going to be hampering the part, or at least, making an obstacle for me to experience, you know, how loving and trust how loving Krishna is, and actually feel secure that in the lotus feet of Krishna, I'm safe and I'll be okay. So um, it comes to this balance between discipline and love. So we have to have this perfect balance. And that's what the devotional service gives us. That is not just rules and regulations, but it's a relationship that we have with Krishna and Krishna's devotees that is very, very loving. And and by in the practice of Krishna consciousness, if we try, if we do, then we're able to have these experiences of amazing kindness. So so that part is very important. In one sense, yes, we follow discipline, but we know that even if we feel a little afraid of not of making a mistake or committing an offense or things like that, we know that Krishna is very kind. We trust that, and Krishna shows it over and over. But if I think that I made a mistake and I'm gonna go to hell forever, that's not, you know it almost like closes you. I mean, how you can see God as a loving personality, you know is you seen as this depicted like a very, very sort of a stern type of God, sitting in a throne behind a big desk and with a one of those, how you call, yeah, gavel, like that, making judgments. So it's hard. Okay, all right. Thank you. Garantara Shiman Bhagavatam ki Jai.